Right. I think we've got most folks in from the waiting room, so we can go ahead and get started. Um, by way of introduction, my name is Jess Blackwell, and if you've been joining our trainings in the past, I'm sure you've seen my face. My organization, High Sierra Energy Foundation, leads codes and standards for the Central California Rural Regional Energy Network, or what we like to call CCRN. Jennifer, if you could go to the next slide for me. Just a little bit of background, if you have not joined one of our trainings before, regional energy networks are essentially designed to deliver CPUC energy efficiency programs. RENs are really amazing because they allow us to design innovative programs and really focus on serving our communities in ways that are a bit more tailored. And so one big focus for RENs is to work to serve hard to reach customers as well as disadvantaged and underserved communities. Next slide. Our REN was approved in September of 2024, and the County of San Luis Obispo is the lead administrator for CCRN. And then we work with partners from the Monterey region and the Central Valley region, all the way out to the Eastern Sierra, where I'm based, to deliver currently 6 programs. And that includes residential workforce education training. There's a commercial program, public agency program for Monterey Bay, as well as codes and standards, which brings us here today. And we are still working through launching a finance program as well as a strategic energy management program. And then just a little bit about our partners and where our territory reaches. Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments on the Central Coast and San Joaquin Valley Clean Energy Organization are our partners in the Central Valley. And then again, High Sierra Energy Foundation out here in the Eastern Sierra. And the County of Ventura supports us in an advisory role. Awesome. And then I'm going to pass it to our partners at Inbalance Green Consulting, Jennifer Rennick and Grant Murphy, who are going to be leading today's training. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks, Jess. Welcome, everybody. Grant and I, we're both certified energy analysts, and I'm a licensed architect, and Grant has a whole bunch of other letters after his name that has to do with Passive House, and he does a lot of our ACCA calcs in office. And we're gonna kind of review that. And while I give you a little bit of background about codes and standards and the Code Coach service, feel free to put in the chat like your background. And if you're relatively new to the ACCA, or if you're looking to like hone in on what maybe plans examiner could be looking at, or I don't know, Grant, chime in what you think would be useful to know so we can help folks.
Yeah, just your relative experience with it, and if your role or title or whatever you want to give us, it helps Jennifer and I just kind of tailor the direction of these, live as we're doing it.
Yes, so yeah, well, Grant's going to monitor the chat, and I'm going to navigate the slide deck. And we don't have a lot of folks on the call. It kind of depends on how much show up. I think it looks like the people are still joining, and so there's opportunities for us to hear a little bit more about what's going on with you guys and what is happening in your experience, whether you're in the field or in a planning building department, etc. Part of the program with CCRN is we have support for the Codes and Standards program, and through that we do trainings like we're doing today. We could do them in person as well, and we could do them on specialty topics. We've done it for some specific planning and building departments in the region. So reach out to Jess if you need any of those kinds of services. We're available. And then another part of what we offer for the CCRN is our Energy Code Coach. It's free. It's for all the plans examiners. It's for architects. You could send homeowners to us if they have a lot of questions that you can't answer. It's completely available to anybody. And some of the common, Code Coach questions we get could be as simple as like, how do I get my Title 24 registered. So if that's something you're planning a building department is too short staffed to deal with, you could send them to the code coach and we could help people do that, for example. And then some of the specialized trainings we've done has to do with understanding Cal Green a little better. Sometimes jurisdictions aren't sure how many accessible like EV charging spaces they need. They know Cal Green requires the EV charging, but then it's, how do you work that together with what's going on at the planning department? And then just the questions go on from there. Today's class does give you learning units if you're a licensed architect, 1.5 AIA learning units, and if you're with the ICC, you'll get the 0.15 units for today's class, and you will get a copy of the slides as just mentioned. And today we're gonna do an overview of HVAC design in the ACCA manuals. Go to big picture. Then we're going to hone in on the residential heating cooling systems and kind of how that ties in with the energy code. We're going to look at the energy code compliance process a little bit. And then we're going to have an opportunity to go more into the details for plan checking ACCA. And that part of the presentation, we can really kind of cater to where you all are at in terms of what you're doing in your jurisdiction, and then give you some best practices and resources. So today, like I mentioned, we're going to focus on the residential HVAC. So specifically the heating and cooling, air conditioning, and it's mainly for ducted systems, which is what the ACCA manuals that we're going to go over were designed for, is ducted systems. And we're not going to address the outside air or indoor air quality because that isn't really part of the ACCA manuals, just to be clear on that, but it is definitely a part of the energy code and our building code. And then when we take a look at what we are going to be doing today and kind of reviewing and why it's pertinent is the energy code itself is concerned with energy usage. And so it turns out that your heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, that HVAC system size or its capacity, its efficiency, and the air distribution system that goes along with it, all those things impact how much energy a building uses, and therefore it has been incorporated into the energy code. And the kind of the big picture goals of good HVAC design is to have the correct amount of outside air for health and welfare. So, like I said, that part is regulated under the energy code, but the ACCA calcs themselves don't necessarily address that specifically, but it is can be part of your design depending on if your ducted system and your air handler is bringing in the outside air, or if you have a separate system, which is we're seeing to be more and more common, is a separate system will bring in the outside air, and your heating and cooling system will just address the heating and cooling of the air that's within the building envelope. Energy conservation, having a right size piece of equipment keeps that equipment from cycling on and off and just allows it to run at a steady state, which is more efficient. It definitely reduces the maintenance and prolongs the equipment life when your equipment can just run at a steady state and not be cycling on, then off, trying to adjust itself for the loads. And the newer equipment that we're seeing go in a lot of places has the ability to maintain a more steady state. And of course, the occupant is more comfortable when we have a system that doesn't cycle on and off and can maintain a steady state and a consistent temperature throughout. And then, of course, that saves money for the occupants, both in terms of their utility costs, but also replacing parts that are unnecessarily wearing out. Anything, Grant, you want to add to that? I'm going to have Grant just jump in whenever he feels fit, feels it
Uh,
needed.
yeah. No, those are great. I just threw in the chat just, the baseline we're kind of chasing because this presentation, we've done it, a couple different versions of it in the past. And what we're finding in field and in our private work is it's just really inconsistent across jurisdictions requiring this. So we're still just trying to figure out, is our message, hey, we just need to talk about why this is important and emphasize what the simplest method of getting it required for your jurisdictions are, or are jurisdictions beyond that already and they need assistance in doing some sort of validation that the documents they're receiving are accurate, useful, or maybe this is just a total pain in your plan check process. I've seen the wide range of it, so we're really curious about what you guys are seeing and what you're doing
Yeah,
in your offices.
that is really, really true. Like Grant said, we've done this where it's just been like really, really general, like here's the main manuals we're talking about that are referenced in the code. So here's the slide for the more general stuff. And then we'll go in deeper. But one of the reasons we've pulled together some of these slides of that we'll get into later of like why are you plan checking this stuff so carefully is because one of the jurisdictions asked us to specifically address that because there was an outfit installer in a particular jurisdiction that basically was just putting in whatever was on their truck. And there were enough homeowners that actually complained to the small planning and building department. And it was a relatively small one. There's only a handful of staff members. And they realized, okay, if this is going to happen, maybe the best thing is to really help these homeowners have the ability to go back to these people and say, I want to see the load calcs you did that's required by code. And that's kind of what started it. So we're curious to know what your situation is. But anyway, okay, back to what's referenced in the energy code specifically for residential manual J, D, and S. ACCA. And ACCA is the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, nonprofit trade association. So these standards were developed in the 1980s. And then they got pulled into the code in the 2010 code. And then we saw a little bit more traction, 2013 code cycle. And so the requirement for this has had a little bit of tweaking here and there, but it's been mentioned in Cal Green code and Title 24 code for a while. It's just that we're not seeing it necessarily done or being plan checked across all the jurisdictions. The HVAC for ACCA, the design process, they've kind of laid out. And again, this is for the tradespeople. This is for the installers. This is for the folks who are designing the system to be installed in residential applications and now commercial. But they have a process where you first calculate the load. How much energy is this building going to require for heating and cooling it to keep it comfortable? So you do a load calculation. Then based on that, you choose the equipment and then you do a duct design to go with that equipment. And you may have to go back and it's a little iterative because your duct design can impact your equipment. Then you take a closer look at your air distribution, and then you do your testing and balancing of the duct system. And then there's a manual or a methodology that's laid out in those manuals for each of those parts of the design process. And today we're going to look at manual J, S, and D, or at least what the forms look like and something you could plan check. Now, if you take a look at go onto the ACCA website, I'm pointing this out now because you can log on to that website and start to get an idea of all the software that's available and also get access to the standards themselves and information at the very end I'll show you that can help you for plans examination. But there's currently about 10 different software products for doing the residential J or the load calculations, and about 5 products that include the manual D, the duct design. And there's a couple of software types that we see most commonly, or software brands, and we're going to be using examples from RightSoft because that seems to be a really common program that we're seeing. Well, Title 24 itself, the building standards codes, includes 12, well, actually 13 parts, because there's a part 2 for the building code and a part 2.5, the residential code. And HVAC, the manuals we're talking about, it's embedded in our mechanical code, which is part 4, the energy code, part 6, which is kind of the world that Grant and I live in. And then it's also mentioned in Cal Green, which is part 11. And there's not exactly a matchy consistency between those 3 codes. And in some cases, like Cal Green references the actual year of the manual of the code, where Part 6 keeps it more general, and then the mechanical code goes into more detail and also mentions the other manuals that deals with testing and balancing and your air distribution systems. So they all 3 codes do reference proper sizing and design of residential heating and cooling systems. And the way it's spelled out is you can use ACCA, which is what we're focusing on. You can also use ASHRAE methodology, which is fine. If you're mechanical engineer, you're probably using the ASHRAE methodology. If you're, supporting the trades or in the trades, like the kind of work that Grant and I do, then we're usually following ACCA and using that to support the residential designs. And then other approved methods. But mostly we're going to be seeing that it's the ACCA because that's the industry standard. So I'm going to touch on this really quickly. This is for the folks, if you're doing the plans examination and you are getting some pushback and you are asking for these kind of calculations to be done, then your code reference under Cal Green would be section 4.507, and then it just spells out that you need to follow, manual J, manual D, and manual S for the energy, for the residential design of the system. And then the mechanical code does include J, D, S, and then also manual B for balancing for residential. And then under the energy code, there's a few sections that are under the mandatory measures, meaning it's the part of the code that applies to all of the residential occupancy types. And it specifically mentions you could do ASHRAE handbook. It gives you B, the residential comfort system installation standards. That doesn't actually give you a method for doing this. It's one of the, I think, slight inconsistencies of our code, but it does specifically say you could follow ASHRAE, and then you could follow the ACCA Manual J for your loads. And ASHRAE type is, you might see embedded in Energy Pro, which is the software used for Title 24. So you can have your Title 24 consultant run you loads using Energy Pro. But you'll need to go to a different software than to deal with the other equipment selection and duct design. And then the ACCA Manual J is the industry standard. And then that kind of next level, part two of the mandatory measures, is it spells out what you're allowed to do for your um, temperatures, which and your design temperatures. The reason I mention that is because for the cold climates, and I don't know if we have anyone from the eastern part of our region or up in the Sierras or on the eastern side of the Sierras. I have taken a look at some of the materials that have been turned in for permit, specifically for some of the Title 24, and I've seen that the uh, Energy Pro ASHRAE loads were done, but then that's where it stopped. And the particular piece of equipment that's called out didn't actually meet any of these outdoor and design temperatures following this methodology. And so, yeah, you could say they ran the load calcs, but then their equipment selection wasn't really appropriate. And then there was no indication that they had any kind of duct design. And so it's maybe assumed that if you're in a really cold climate, just because if someone installed a piece of equipment that didn't meet those things, it would be such a royal failure, maybe. But I think, that's kind of where it depends on where are you at as a plans examiner, and if you're asking for these things ahead of time, or if it's just really left up to the homeowner and who they hire to do the work.
This will also probably come up again. Often we get the question of like, what are the first things for me to check on a report? Hey, I'm already requiring it. I'm receiving them. Now I don't really know how to confirm that they're accurate to some degree. And there's, a lot there to really have a useful design document. But one of the easiest ones to check, and one that we've seen, I don't know why, for different reasons people mess with it, but they change those design temperatures. This is these softwares are an engineering software. It's not a compliance software like we're used to with the energy code. So you're not really locked out of changing parameters. So we have seen a lot of people change the outdoor temperatures, the design temps, the indoor design temps, and it's just the easiest thing to say you're not supposed to do that, even though someone who's designing this may say, "Hey, it's not actually that hot here." Well, there's approved weather files that you're supposed to be using, and you're not supposed to take it upon yourself to decide what you're designing to.
Yes, and I think the only exception to that might be there's a couple locations where if you're in climate zone 16, you might not have a city or one of the official weather files that's close to where you are. You might be in one of the outlying areas, and so then you would have to use your best, again, like an engineering side of it. You'd look at it, you'd get a handle on what that microclimate is, and then pick the file that is the most appropriate. And that there will be a little bit of that. But like I said, this one of the plans that I was really taking a closer look at, um, they just they didn't use the right weather file in the sense that it was going to be too warm for where the location actually was. And then the equipment wasn't rated for, you know, cold weather. So I don't know what became of the project, but anyways, it's something for you all, I think, to kind of keep track of, and that would be some of kind of the basic stuff. But we'll dig in a little deeper. This last thing on the mandatory measures, it's a different part of the section. It's still in mandatory measures that deals specifically with the duct design, but it doesn't, in part, 6, the energy code. It doesn't explicitly say you have to follow ACCA Manual D duct design. What it says is, oh, you got to do all the stuff that's in the CMC or the California Mechanical Code. And then the first section listed here, it says you use the ACCA Manual D duct design. So kind of FYI. But the energy code section does go on to have a lot of detailed requirements for duct leakage location, insulation, the fan efficiency, air filters, etc. So why kind of that's sort of important is because in this whole process of who does what, a lot of these a lot of the testing for this, it comes up with a HERS rater, or now called ECC Energy Code Compliance Rater. And they'll test for duct leakage, etc., but not necessarily have had any chance to look at, nor is it their role to see if the system was designed to meet these loads in the first place. So that's a little bit where it kind of comes back to the authority having jurisdiction. And then more and more, and one of our colleagues who does a lot of this work, Russ King, he's been kind of promoting the idea that maybe we should support homeowners a bit more and enable them to get the loads on their house. And that does harken back to that kind of the reason I pulled this a similar class together in the first place is because it was the homeowners actually complaining to a local jurisdiction about what was being installed. And so there's now software vendors that are using the like a Laser you can put on your iPhone, and there's some other types where you can go now and quickly get measurements and a floor plan and a volumetric of an existing home, and then you can take that and send it to somebody who will run your load calculations for you. So kind of an interesting
I
idea.
wanted to chime in on this because it was a question too. Natalia, who's an architect, asked who should complete the manuals. She threw out the architect, MEP, or installer. Um, what I found is it's not one person, and it becomes part of the in what stage of a project and type of project does this come up. So one option is the installer should do it. That realistically makes the most sense because they will be the one installing this design. I can create an ACCA document and work with the architect myself. And then in reality, the installer might just do whatever they want, right? So, perfect world, in my opinion, a contractor is doing these documents, who's the actual mechanical subcontractor. That's a good test I use to see even if a mechanical contractor has ever heard of these documents to try to identify, hey, like, they're trying to do a good job out there working on these systems. Um, it's also it can often be unrealistic. Another option is hiring a private consultant. You can hire a mechanical engineer, but mechanical engineer companies often are working in the non-res space. So small residential projects, I know in our area, there aren't many who take on this scope of work. They're busy. So there's private consultants, some the ECC raters, some Tile 24 shops, and it comes up sooner. Say it's a new home, it has to come up before a contractor's been selected. It has to be brought up while we're determining if we're able to have a vaulted ceiling and where we're locating these air handlers and how big is the ducts and where are we routing them. So it's not fair to expect a contractor, an installing contractor, to provide these documents because it's just going to be too late in the process. So often an architect will hire them directly and include it as part of their design scope. I think that's an effective way of doing it. Additionally, like Jennifer said, having the homeowner, because they're going to be the one contracting directly to their builder, having them either do it themselves if they're a go-getter and there's new softwares out there, or hiring that private consultant themselves and having a load report and an idea of how they want their home to operate from a heating and cooling standpoint. If they're involved, that's a great avenue too. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach in that regard.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, now just sort of I'm going to be throwing out a bunch of terms, so super quick review. This is the energy code. When I say mandatory requirements, which I did kind of mention, that means, energy efficiency measures that are applicable to all projects. Okay. Then prescriptive component package. It's essentially a checklist. You got to do everything on the checklist. So you have to have these kind of windows and not too many of them, and this kind of wall with this kind of insulation, this kind of roof with that kind of insulation, this efficiency on your equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Performance method is where you can trade off efficiency of your windows, for example, with the efficiency of your walls. There's, as long as you meet an energy budget and you are better than your standard design or that prescriptive component package that makes your standard design. If you're better than that, you can move forward. The reason I mention this is because the ACCA stuff, it ties in with energy code compliance, and there is kind of a parity with that. And it comes into play if you're going to start plan checking the ACCA calcs, then you're most likely going to have a performance method, maybe not, but a lot of times a performance method, Title 24, and you're going to have a corresponding load calculation with the ACCA calcs. And then one of the things we'll talk about is, do those things match? And that it's really in the world of getting your permit. But once you've like submitted for the design permit, you have our Title 24 CF1R documents. But then during construction, you have your installation documents and your verification documents. This is where the ECC rater or HERS rater comes in, and they'll do some field verification, or they will help the installer sometimes complete those forms, because not all installers and general contractors quite know how to do it yet. So it depends on how friendly your ECC rater is. But by then, the person doing the field verification, they're counting on the design work already being done, and that the duct design was already done. And now they just get to test for leakage. And then, the final part of the occupancy is when all of these forms are finished, and authority having jurisdiction can go online and see that the project status report is complete, and you have green little check marks everywhere, or a circle with a green circle with a check mark in it means the project's done. And our ECC rater, a lot of times if you have a duct system, there's going to be certain things that are triggered, and some of the stuff they're going to look at is like proper airflow at the return register for the HVAC system, and make sure that the ducts are not leaking. Also verifying the duct location, because that's kind of a big deal. If the ducts are completely in conditioned space, or are they up in a semi-conditioned attic or an unconditioned attic or in a crawl space. There's a number of forms that kind of in the energy code that really looks at good HVAC and duct design. However, it doesn't really replace having an appropriate, well thought out design, like Grant was talking about, that there's so many other things that need to come into play during the design of the house in the first place. And I know this is really hard to read, but it was more, I wanted to give you more of an impression of the forms and the things that the ECC rater is looking at and how that kind of fits into the overall process. And a lot of it is looking at fan efficiency and airflow rate. This is true whether it's new construction or like complete new systems and alterations. And duct leakage that I mentioned. And there's even refrigerant charge on your heat pumps and your air conditioning that's supposed to be looked at, which improves performance if that is all charged at appropriate level. And also taking a look at air filters and et cetera, depending on which of these forms kind of comes up in the design process. So when it comes to plan checking, we kind of hit on a little bit of this already is, and kind of wondering in that question is who's using it? Are the ACCA calcs being asked for in your jurisdiction? If you're brave enough to tell us, we'd like to know. We're just really curious because, like we said, we've worked with jurisdictions where it's just like, nah, everything's third party, and the third party entity, if they ask for it, that's up to them. And then, like I said, we've had jurisdictions where they got complaints enough that they started doing it in-house. So this is kind of a bit of a dialogue. I'm going to toss this kind of to Grant to see if he sees anything in the chat, but also if he just wants to mention something we haven't hit on yet.
Yeah, Jaden said he's never seen calcs, rarely sees duct layout. Um, I mean, in my experience, I don't see it. I mean, even in our areas, a lot of the private work to the people I work with, more in Nevada, but not so much California. Interesting. Um, in our private work, even in our areas, a lot of the people I work with, they all say, "Hey, yeah, like we should do duct design, and like here's a price. It's part of the, I do tile 24s. I'll do your duct design as well, or I'll do your loads." And they'll say, "Oh, we'll wait and see if we get called for it." You know, okay, it's I'm not the responsible one to force a project to require it. I think it's a good idea, but
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep going.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it kind of it just I think it depends. I think it depends. Um, if you were to start asking for ACCA, the ACCA calcs, as we call it, ACCA Manual J, Manual S, Manual D, um, what could you expect to see in that report? And if there's a lot of different forms, a lot of different parts to these reports they could give you. And so there's a general information sheet, which I'll show you a little bit next. And this basically is your plans examiner review form. So this would be as a plans examiner, if you were going to start asking to see the calculations as part of the permit package submittal, then you'd want to include that they include a plans examiner review form. Um, and then there's different forms that are included with the load calcs, with your equipment selection, which is manual S, and your duct design, which is manual D. And then in order to actually plan check it, depending on how accurate what you're really looking for, then there's a number of equipment specification sheets that you can actually ask for. And like I was saying, that one jurisdiction where they decided to really take this on in-house because of the complaints of what was going on. So then one of the kind of leverage points they had was actually saying, hey, you say this in your calculations. I want you to give me the OEM or the original equipment manufacturer performance data so I can see that that piece of equipment matches what you've put in these calculations. And that went a long way, I think, to helping everyone out in that jurisdiction. So this ACCA provides it creates this form. So these examples are from RightSoft. I know you may not be able to read the form exactly. That's okay. The idea is that the thing I want you to understand is that there is a residential plans examiner review form that's part of it. So you could ask for that form, and then at the top of the form, this is where, similar to when you do intake on all your other requirements for a permit, is then they're saying, here's the required attachments that you would need. Are they attached? Yes or no? And a lot of times I've seen this cover sheet being turned in and then nothing attached to it. So that's not quite doing ACCA calcs. It's just the cover sheet that's supposed to help you as a plans examiner see that manual J was done, manual D, and you have some spec sheets on it. So kind of what does that look like now? The cover sheet, we go into the manual J calculation, which is loads. And again, loads refers to the heating and cooling calculation that allows you to know what the capacity, the size of the mechanical equipment that you'll eventually be picking out. And similar to what we do in Title 24, this has got to be based on the location, that climate data we're talking about. The building orientation is very important. And one of the things I've seen is I'll see that a load calculation has been done, only none of the windows show up. That's one of the flags. And at that point, if you are plan checking it, you can just turn around and say, oh, you got to put the windows in your load calcs. Um, and those walls, roof, windows, those are kind of the main important things. And then there's a list of all, if they do it right, then all the other things that are bullet pointed would be in there, including your ventilation and your infiltration and your occupant load. ACCA does have a brochure there for their manual J that tries to highlight what's the most important thing to look at. And um, those most important things to look at is those design temperatures, especially your outdoor temperatures, what you're designing it to, the windows, including the type, amount, your duct location is really important. And a lot of times your roof or your ceiling. Those are the highest level things to really look at. And then those things really impact your energy use. And so I created a little chart on the right for your use that just kind of goes down in order of what we've seen for a lot of the climates in California, what is kind of the highest impact on your energy use, and then a little bit of kind of U factors or numbers or things you would look for on the actual documents. And by U factor. I just realized I didn't define that in case y'all are new to the stuff. A U factor is a measurement of your heat transfer through an assembly. And it could be through a window or through the whole wall assembly. And a lot of times these forms, including our energy calcs, the ACCA calcs, they look like a bunch of numbers. So it's no wonder, like if you just visually kind of get a glimpse of these forms, you can see that if you're new to this, it's like, what are you going to even be plan checking for? And depends on how experienced you get with this, what you really want to look for. But W, if you take a look at the TY for type column, on the far left, that excerpt, kind of a blow up. The W means walls. And sometimes I've seen where you have a lot of walls, but no G's for glazing or window. And that you, if you know nothing else, you could see a bunch of walls are there, great, no G's, no windows. You don't have to do anything. You could just close it and just say, okay, you got to update it. And you could stop because everything else you look at is completely a waste of time. And then kind of the next thing is this is a perimeter, okay, for their floor, great. C for ceiling, F for the floor. Then if you get down into it a little bit more, they've got all the windows, it appears. Then you can do a quick check to see, hey, is their ceiling and their floor area roughly matching? And in this case, they are. And you know, you can move on after that. Now, when you get,
I do want to chime in,
yeah,
Jennifer, because a lot of this it feels a little redundant too when you if you're already plan checking Tile 24 energy code calcs, right? Like we're already
yeah,
looking at a lot of these items and it's displayed very differently. And I just want to like make the differentiation, kind of why this ACCA load component from a plan check perspective is more difficult because Tile 24 energy code, they say, hey, it's an R21 wall or an R19 wall, and then you look at the plan and they have an R25 wall. They went and spray foamed something. Well, you exceeded what was in the report, and we've all learned that exceeding a performance spec in the energy code is fine, right? Like they complied with something worse they said they were going to do, and they're doing something better. And that gets a little tricky in a couple nuanced places within the energy code. Well, in this document, this is a supposed to be a useful design document. It's not a compliance document. So the differences in how you modeled for these loads, it's going to just directly affect what type of system you're sizing and the effectiveness of that system. It's supposed to be used. This is a design process, not a compliance process. So it is a difficult differentiation because from a plan check perspective, you guys are enforcing code. And hey, the tile 24 is wrong. You're not meeting minimum code. That's an easy approach. This one, you're not doing their design. So if they have garbage in it and say, hey, I designed garbage, that really falls on the problem of the designers and the installer and the owner. It's not really a enforced item. So this is a we're edging into engineering for small residences.
yeah, yeah. And then like I said, I mean, kind of what got us onto this though was, those complaints to a small jurisdiction
Yep.
because of someone took root, an installer took root in their community that was just putting whatever
Yeah, I
off
mean,
of the back of the truck in it.
in
And it,
reality too, I find
yeah,
it really impactful because of the horror stories we've heard, and then you get calls that someone spent X dollars on some new system or got sold on it, and then the system doesn't operate, and you go back and look and you say, oh, well, I can see why it doesn't operate well, and
yeah,
so this is the vehicle we have, but it's not a straightforward, simple thing to like check and verify.
right, right. And that's why we kind of like this high level thing. And like I said, I've seen these load calcs that just have no windows at all. But windows have a huge impact on energy use and on your loads. And then it kind of goes back to that equipment and is it going to cycle on and off, or can it just not meet the loads at all because it didn't take for account the heat loss through the windows in winter in a colder climate, and yeah. So it's like high order magnitude things. And then same, oh gosh, on the J manual J calcs, there's a form, and a portion of that form it talks about your duct loads. So what load does the duct themselves put on the cooling and heating equipment. So if you have ducts located in an unconditioned attic and you assume a certain amount of leakage or insulation on the ducts, those ducts themselves are sort of like a small room in and of itself compared to the house because of the amount of volume of air those ducts contain and the air moving through it. So, possible red flag, and I've seen this before, is where the ducts don't have any load at all to the calculation, meaning you just see 0, 0, 0, 0. And the only way that's possible if the ducts are completely within the conditioned space. And that does show up on your Title 24, and that is a measure that your ECC or HERS rater would actually have to verify. So if you do see a bunch of zeros like this, again, it's a quick spot check. Maybe you can't go through everything else, but you flip to this page and you go, oh, it's all zeros. Does the design actually have the ducts inside? No, it doesn't. They're in an unconditioned attic. Okay, you can close it up and just say, no, you gotta, put the ducts in the proper location. Or vice versa. The Title 24 doesn't call for it. The performance is going to improve, but usually if ducts are in conditioned space, this is a design issue. This is like something the architect would have had to have designed for because you're talking about inverted soffits or soffits within the space, or how is the attic and the roof, everything detailed so that it is truly within the conditioned envelope. So, okay, so there's one thing you can kind of look for if you know nothing else about ACCA calcs. There is a load short form, which is a fine, and then on that short form, it gives you climatic data. So at the top of the form, you can quickly look and just see, hey, does this match what's in the Title 24? Are they locating this in the right climate? Are they using the right, temperatures? And then there's a summary of the room, floor area, the relative load. If you're new to all this, that may not mean anything to you, but if you're if you're like third-party plan check, you've been looking at a lot of Title 24s, this is pretty easy once you have some experience to glance at and just get a sense of like, do the areas make sense? Do the U factor, do the other values make sense? Um, but that comes with experience. But I just pointed out that's what's on the short form is a quick check. Or if you're doing these calcs yourself, then that's a good thing to print out because you too, as your own, looking at making sure you didn't miss anything obvious. These are good things to spot check. Like sometimes Grant will do those calcs and every once in a while he'll have me look at them, and those are the things I kind of look at just real quick to see if we've got the basics in there in case we didn't miss something obvious or accidentally. Okay, so then manual S is the equipment selection. So based on those loads, based on how much heating and cooling is needed, now we can choose a piece of equipment that's going to meet those heating and cooling loads. And then part of what comes into play with this is the capacities, meaning the output of the heating and the cooling when it's in those modes, and the blower performance. So, and the blower meaning fan, and your duct design, it does have a certain static pressure that's associated with it, and your CFM, which is cubic feet per minute. So that's the amount of air at a rate that can be taken care of by this. Those things play back and forth with each other. So you'll select some equipment, do the duct design. You may have to come back, adjust the equipment, or adjust your design to meet those. It's iterative. Again, it's a design tool. It's meant to help you design a better system. But from a plans examination point of view, it's like, well, did you do it? Oh, you did, and you attach the forms. okay, we believe you. Because at that point, you're not gonna like do the design for them. But what this looks like, what this form looks like on the manual S compliant report is there is a section that does give you those design temperatures. It tells you the manufacturer's performance data, and it also tells you if the capacity is going to meet the load and if it's within 100 to 115% of that load. And the idea here is not to radically oversize the piece of equipment, because if it's too large with the older style where they didn't have variable frequency or variable capacity in the equipment, it was either just on or off, on or off. So you try and have the piece of equipment be as close to the loads as possible. And same thing, for the cooling within really close, but the heating, it's a little more leeway, 100 to 140% is usually what we're targeting. And then if these are wildly off, if you're a designer, you would then look for a piece of equipment that is more appropriately sized. For your manual duct uh, or manual D for duct design, this is where we're really trying to lay out the ducts. And this, again, it kind of, when Grant's doing this work, for example, he'll work with a homeowner directly sometimes and the designer, because they're going to place the registers or maybe a type of register. Or one of the projects recently, I worked with the architect, the homeowner, and the installer all together, because um, we were trying to optimize these register layouts, and I was helping them come up with a duct layout that was going to meet their needs. Plus, their roof had a very interesting configuration, so we had to be creative. So then it was a really collaborative process, and it was an iterative process. And that, I think, would kind of be the ideal world, but that we know doesn't always happen. And then this duct layout, it takes into account your duct sizes, your diameters, whether it's flex duct or rigid ducts, and whether you have plenum, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, Grant, you want to jump in on this, and then anything you want to
Yeah.
add
Um,
yet? Or just jump in, or if you see
yeah, sure.
questions in the
This is
chat.
just the why this is important. Um, Noise is probably the number one thing that I hear from people is that, leaky ducts, hard T duct design where it's, there's no elbows in the routing of it. Returns not sized very well, so that you have a whistling in your return. I would say what Jennifer was mentioning about just space. Space is usually where I get the call. Cathedral ceilings are very popular. Um, Having no ductless systems in some of these higher custom homes. They want the ducted, but then there's no space to route them because we have no attic. So trying to configure that comes up often. But then kind of in the weeds of when you actually have a well operating, well designed system is, yeah, you get more efficient. So that's efficiency in delivery of heating and cooling, but also on your utility bills. I'd say most homeowners are more interested in um, the consistent comfort delivery. Longer lifespan of equipment. If we're installing these new, it doesn't usually come up, but it is when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. So that was worst case scenario when something's really poorly designed and you have failures just after getting these things newly installed. That's horrible. Humidity, and we're not dealing with it too much where I'm at in my private work, but I hear about it all over where the new system comes in and all of a sudden, they just re-insulated. They just redid the ductwork, and now we have these weird condensation points that we're finding in the home. That's really problematic as we're using these a lot of foam materials. Yeah, that's the right sizing. The biggest thing for the right sizing too is the difference between furnaces and heat pumps. Jennifer mentioned it. Furnaces are really easy to design with. They come on, they go off. You oversize it, it dumps a ton of heat into your home. We're not talking about cooling generally. And now with the heat pumps, they take a little more effort to properly design them because they're trying to operate 24/7. When they're running all the time is when they're most efficient. They're not a cycling system. They're trying to sip electricity and just put out a lower temp, consistent comfort distribution. So that's kind of my biggest ones. Let's see, James always has good questions. Calculations, equipment section. If heating only, sizing is based on the heat loss load. If air conditioning, including cooling heat gain rules, potential delta heat for air. Sorry, I don't think that was a question. I think James is giving us good information on designing systems. Um, I'll
Right, but
reread
it
that.
kind of ties in exactly with what you were saying and where you're going with what we're seeing with the heat pump systems. For example, like this is a picture of like a pancake unit, heat pump. So this unit doesn't bring in the outside air. It's just dealing with the heating and the cooling. Um, and it's designed to, like Grant said, run 24/7. And the supplier comes out and then it branched out to a few different bedrooms. And then there was one larger return kind of centrally located in the hallway. And the duct was lengthened on purpose by the installer to keep it quiet. And which is, good. It doesn't really show up on our calc so much, but the homeowner was very happy that it was quieter, having a longer duct run for the return. The equipment performed well, but when you do that right sizing and sizing it and all that, it's this piece of equipment, it works good for like the western part of California. We're in, the central western part, so of our region. We're not talking North California and it was fine. But then once we move inland and like up into the Sierras, climate zone 16 and that, then these calcs become more and more important because um, like Grant was saying, the furnaces are a lot easier to design for. They're either on or off, and then the furnaces would be oversized because you're in a colder climate and you just have more heat and you just blast the heat. But now these things, you have to size them properly because if they're not sized properly, you can get a big humidity buildup in the home because part of what they do when you're in that cooling mode is they condense the air out. They well, the air the water condenses and then you have to get that water out, and so the sizing becomes a little more important, but also to have equipment that's actually rated for cold climates. And that doesn't show up in the Title 24 ASHRAE load calc, and it can in the ACCA stuff, but really you're maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds here, but if you're in those colder climates, you really want to get like an Energy Star rated cold climate heat pump unit because of the way our Title 24 calculations limit. We're only looking at like 47 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe, and then, the cooling temperature. Whereas we know that in some of those locations, you're needing to design for 0 degrees or -5 degrees. And so then it's important to really look at your equipment selection and where your ducts are located. Okay, and keep moving on. This is this is what writes off software looks like. The other software has different versions of what this looks like, but in general, if you're going to do a plan check, you'd want to see that there is a sketch of the house and that someone did do a duct design and that the duct layout is roughly kind of spelled out with the register locations. And the one plan check thing I'd add is, does that layout, does it actually match the house? Because I have seen through one of the ECC HERS raters I've worked with just for fun, he's passed some of these things he's come across to me, and he'll say, does this match the house of where I'm at? No, like these things wasn't even the right project, but just submit it. So that as a plans examiner, that would be one thing you could look at and just go, oh yeah, that roughly looks like the house. Okay, good. Move on. The other thing that comes up is once you kind of, if you really are starting to get into it, and you think you're not being given something that is at least representative of the project, you can ask, and it's okay to ask for the blower performance information or the fan flow information and have them give that to you. It takes a little bit of practice with all this to know what to do with it, but at least it's kind of a first step, and you can look to see if the static pressure and the blower matches. I know that's getting into the weeds a little bit for a lot of folks, but when you start looking at these more, that would be something to look at. But from kind of the plan examiner perspective, it's the static pressure and friction rate form that really what you would want to look at is midway down where it says friction rate. Does in the right software forms, does it say okay? Do all four of those spots say okay? If they all say okay, and there isn't anything else that's really crazy or unusual, but again, that's kind of based on experience. Then at least you've done that. But if they give you a static pressure friction rate worksheet and these don't say okay, you can say you noticed it and send it back and have them go back and look at it. And then if it does say okay and you want to, for fun, get into it a little bit more, you can look to see, what they assumed for fans pressure drop or some of the transitions or the effective length and all. And before I get this slide to you, I'll make sure that you can read this last bullet point.
That static pressure one's one of the easy examples of the garbage in, garbage out, that this is a useful document if someone's using it properly, because you can even see there, like on the filter, it says the static pressure is 0.05. At the stages that this document shows up at plan check, in a design package, what's the likelihood that someone's going to know what filter they're putting in? You can guess depending on the home, but changing that filter static pressure loss, that can dramatically change that friction rate calc. So, you know, okay, it says okay, but also, are we really checking filters at this stage? So
Right.
I find it very common that these people put in the same numbers every time, and it says okay, and ideally when installers, putting the system in, they're doing these calcs. They know what filters, they know the static loss of the registers, or they come back and get it revised. I
Yep.
don't find that the industry is even close to at that stage of residential design using these calculation methods, but that's what it was built for. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're working off of.
Right. And then that last bullet point, I'm so sorry, it's hard to read, is the bullet point basically says filter loss could vary greatly, which is exactly what Grant was mentioning. Yeah. So again, these are a design tool, and the jurisdictions we know that are asking for it, they're basically saying, hey guys, you got to start actually designing these systems, and we're gonna begin to put some pressure on you to see that you're at least attempting to design something properly. And then it gives the homeowner some kind of leverage, essentially, in case they need it. Okay, so some of those best practices and resources, in the perfect world, this one here, it's like perfect world versus reality, which is kind of what we're talking about here. In the perfect world, you're going to use that residential plans examiner review form. And you do the plan intake and they're going to check, you know, project summary, check, included. Manual J forms, worksheets included. Manual S summary included. Your duct distribution, duct design summary included. Static pressure friction loss worksheet included. And your OEM or the manufacturer's performance data included. That's the perfect world. But if you haven't even been asking for these things in the first place, I mean, the first step is just to see what kind of reports you get. And then for those of you who are into it, um, if you're really wanting to be, in the world of plans examination or doing design, then, experiment, play around, get the software, for example, get WriteSoft, WriteJ, and WriteD software. I mentioned those as a starting point just because it's the most commonly used, but there are, at least 5 software packages you could choose from. You could get those on the ACCA website if you want to have it include the size selection in the duct design. And then, you compare those ACCA documents to the Title 24 CF1Rs and just see where you get. For your plans examiner and kind of public resource, when you do go onto the ACCA website, they do have brochures for manuals J, S, and D that help code officials. If you're really new to a lot of this stuff and you just need some better talking points, if you're on the design side of it, and better talking points for the homeowners to pay for some of this stuff, there is actually really good information in the Build America. Even though this was printed in 2011, the talking points are still the same. Some of the efficiencies and things like that are different, but a lot of the basic information is still really useful. And then included with those ACCA brochures is some complicated looking flowcharts on what to plan check. It's Once you get into it, this becomes not so complicated, but again, remember, ACCA is to help you be a better designer for the things you're installing. And then as you get into it more, then these things start to make sense. And what I tried to do in those other sheets is just kind of highlight some of the biggest impacts on the energy use or compliance that would be worth spot checking. And then you can keep going deeper. But this here is a resource. And then also, the brochures that ACCA produces as a resource. I just wanted to point that out to you that it exists. And then they tried to come up with a more comprehensive checklist, which includes a lot of the stuff we were talking about. And again, kind of starts at the top, like what's the most important thing to look at. So this is a good resource if all you do is look at the top two or three blocks there, which is your design temperatures, your windows and glass doors, skylights, and then after that would be the walls, the ceilings, the floors. But it turns out your windows and design temperatures, orientation are really the biggest impact. And then this is just to kind of summarize it even more simple is if you're just starting out with this, you're going to ask, if the summary form is included. And if it is, then you're going to say, look, does the Title 24 climate and location match? And is that the right, jurisdiction's right location? And then if you have the forms, the right J form, for example, if you're using right soft, but ACCA J, is the building tree close to Title 24? Is it complete? Like, are the windows in there? Again, that's like the biggest one I've seen where windows are missing. Everything else usually seems to get in there, but windows missing, that's kind of a big one. Um, that red flag, if your duct loss is all 000, that means ducts are in conditioned space. That is one you could quickly check. Um, did they include the manual S report? If they did, then theoretically the system is right sized. And then for the duct layout, you can quickly look at it and just see, is it the right house? Is it the same building? And then if they do include that static pressure friction rate loss form, like Grant was saying, you may not be able to tell exactly it's going to change because we don't know exactly what filter, maybe exactly some of the stuff, but at least if they have a decent starting point and the form says okay, then it is a starting point. And as a plans examiner, you can look at that and say, okay, we checked it. So this would be just kind of the place to start. If nothing else, you would do this and you'd be on your way to starting to include the ACCA on the on your plans
Well,
examination.
and I'll take it even a step further, just based on what I've seen. Just the bare minimum, just what we're asked. Like if even before this is great. And when we get asked to talk about ACCA and the whole process, you can see how this just expands and keeps expanding. But just at a bare minimum, the first ask is familiarize yourself with what the scope of projects require by code and just ask for the load calcs. And if your area and your jurisdiction starts to get used to the idea that, hey, I'm doing a HVAC swap out, I'm doing a new build, I'm doing ductless units, but I'm putting in whatever, I need to show a load calc. Those industry professionals, as you keep asking that, will start to get the hang of it and they'll start to go, oh, this is a useful document. And then maybe, a little bit further down the road, you can start asking for a higher level of detail. But ideally, the private sector recognizes that this improves their work.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So, yeah, exactly. And just kind of, tagging on or kind of summarizing what Grant was just getting to is, yeah, the ACCA manuals, it provides your code compliance. If you start asking for them, people get the hang of it. So it is going to be an easier permit process. And then we like to think of but also for the homeowner too, it's improved thermal comfort, improved indoor health, improved energy efficiency, and then the homeowner is going to get the benefit of that utility savings and comfort. And then your jurisdiction will hopefully avoid what happened to a couple of specifically one jurisdiction I'm thinking of, but it's more than one, where then they quit getting a lot of complaints from local homeowners where things were just wildly different. And the homeowners thought that when they apply for a building permit, that part of that whole process was kind of double checking that the builder installers were doing all the parts and pieces that the code requires. So, yeah, with that, we do have a little bit of time for questions. You could do the hand raise or put it in chat, or if Jess has the ability to unmute people, you could ask.
Yeah, I think everyone does have the ability to come off mute, and I see Jim Tullis jumping in.
Yeah, I see for us here in our jurisdiction, we're looking at the Title 24 and we see that the heat pump and the documents say it has to be a certain gallons and a certain BTU um, and meet certain requirements. And the heating system, it says it has to have a certain BTU capacity and certain listings. And then we see that on the plans, it says that the design has to meet the requirements of the California Mechanical Code, 2025 edition. And you know, typically we say, well, now it's on the contractor to provide all that information that's necessary to get a proper installation of the equipment, the ductwork, the registers, and all everything involved that's with a HVAC system, and that our inspectors are going to look at it, and then the HERS test or the EER uh, guy is going to look at it and assure that everything is right. We don't typically we don't have the time in allotted into deep dive Title 24 reviews as an independent plan review company would have. We're seeing on the average of 700 permits a month come through our desks for the five of us. So our time is very, very limited. We have to kind of go through what we see, what's available to us, and hit the high points and say, yes, it looks like it's in compliance, or no, it's not with the code. Note whether it is or isn't, and move on. I don't know how we can change that, but that's that in our reality, that's the way that it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you guys are following the right steps, and that is the reality. I mean, I hear that from lots of plant checkers. I think like Jennifer mentioned, the leverage for the homeowner that a lot of this is that the responsibility, as you said, it goes on the contractor. They're the ones who are under warranty and they're ultimately responsible. Architect maybe somewhat, right? But um, requiring just from your guys's place, you know, you're getting a hang of re verifying the Title 24 is accurate. You know that when that gets missed, something gets missed, it causes issues with your inspectors in fields with those ECC raters, so that wastes more time because we missed an early correction because of inconsistencies. But then when it comes to this ACCA design document stuff, just having it required, even if you guys don't look at it necessarily, you're not even to that point yet, having it required and as part of their permit set and say, hey, this is for the homeowners. It gives them leverage. The contractor is now more responsible, even if the stuff's all wrong and the contractor didn't do a good job. you know I know there it turns into a world of pointing fingers and who's responsible to do what, and it can get messy. So a lot of jurisdictions I've talked to said it's easier just to not require it, and I totally get that. But we got to find a middle ground somewhere.
I don't know
Dustin,
whether it's still available. And this goes, I'll be honest with you, this goes all the way back to 2016. So codes, but we went to a class.
yeah, there's good
Yep.
essentials. Oh yeah,
Yep.
I think I was
It
in one
was
of those way back when.
a 1-day class, and I don't know whether they still do that. whether that program is still available, and but that was a very good class on understanding, going through Title 24 documents,
Yep.
looking at the plans, looking at the Title 24, looking at the equipment that was noted on the plans, and referencing everything all back together. Like I said, I don't know if they still have that program out there, but that was, to us that went through that, it was a very, very informative
Yeah,
day.
they're great. Energy Code still exists. I highly recommend utilizing them as a resource. They're funded in similar ways that these RENs are. So we're trying to put out the same kind of stuff. We try to meet you guys where you're at with our trainings in shorter time allotments, slightly different tone and topics. I always recommend to anyone in jurisdictions, new hires, that if you can get in their event schedule and find the whole one day, they go very, very deep and it's comprehensive. So I highly recommend it. It's just we're trying to, you know,
Take it in
provide
smaller
training in
bites.
different ways.
Yeah, smaller bites.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Dustin, I saw you had your hand up. Do you want to chime in with something?
Oh, I just wanted to say, we always appreciate your classes, Grant and Jennifer. I'm kind of just backing up Jim on this as far as we're on your side. We see, I mean, how important all this stuff is to collect and that it's accurate. But it is another barrier we're putting in place, and especially with the state of California pushing for cheaper, easier permitting. It seems kind of counterproductive. It's like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because we're with you and we agree. And then there's that other side that's like, well, we're trying to make things streamlined. And it's like, now we're asking for a whole nother set of documents. That seems rough,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, but we agree. I don't know if we're the ones that can make that change in our, but, I appreciate that you guys are pushing for that. And, maybe try to talk to the people that would make that change would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what we can teach on and what content we have is dictated by the state and the CEC. So, outside of trainings, I'm happy to talk about my qualms with how the code's written and all of those kind of issues that we all deal with. But unfortunately, we just have to try to work with what we've got. Um, and yeah, I mean, I hear the pressure you guys get. Um, and so I was just trying to come from the perspective of this is the simplest way to get this thing at least slowly get the ball rolling and hopefully put more pressure on designers, installers, contractors, um, because honestly, from my private work, it's a headache for me when the way everyone works together in these silos, because it just keeps coming back in an iteration for my work. So
Yeah.
it spins my time up too. It spins Jennifer's time up. So we're trying to simplify, and I don't think we have the authority to take
I,
a red
yeah.
pen to anything.
Okay, I get to chime in with one more thing. What sort of one more pitch for, I know it's like adds like a paperwork thing for folks, but if you know they're going to have a ducted system, and that's kind of in the beginning, I prefaced that, but maybe it wasn't super clear. It's really the ducted system. If you've got like mini split, ductless, those are easier to deal with in the new equipment. It can run at a steady state. And so let's say you've got a ductless mini split system. If you wanted to help the homeowners or whatever, if it comes up, you, you'd want that equipment Energy Star cold climate rated if you're in a cold climate, right? So like I was saying, I saw that not even be the case. That would just be the one thing you would want to do for those colder climates. And then if it's a ducted system and you know that, then again, depending on really which one of the climate zones you're in, and if you know you're in a zone that's prone to freezing, again, it's like, okay, it's ask, just ask that they did it. You like Grant said, you don't have to go through all the details of it, but at least start to put it on that checklist. And the reason I mention that is because I had a project, an architect who is really from our area who had gotten used now because of some of the jurisdictions several years back, because of the situation I was talking about locally. They started asking for all these reports because basically the entity kind of moved around within our territory from one jurisdiction to the next, just and then the complaints. And so he hired us, but then it all boiled back to the homeowner saying, "Oh, yeah, well, no one ever asked for this." And then the homeowner was saying that because the installing contractor said that. So basically, the installing contractor talked him out of everything that we had done to save him money because no one in the jurisdiction was going to ask for any of these reports. And I was just like, oh man, even if they had just asked for it, then that homeowner would have had some better leverage understanding because the homeowner really felt island, because they don't know enough to know they should keep asking for it. The architects try to talk them into it. The builders try to talk them out. But so I just kind of go back to that. So I'm just going to plant that seed that
Yeah.
maybe all you have to do is just start asking for it. And
A little inside baseball from where Jennifer's coming from too is she's had experience with some of these predatory HVAC alteration companies. So it goes way over our heads, and it's really a shame to see what some of these clients have been faced with. You
yeah,
know, they can't
that's,
afford this, and they got sold on something that turned out to be garbage. So
yeah, it's
it
true.
sucks to see that reality.
It's true. Oh, and
Well,
okay, two
I was going to
minutes
say
over.
I'm not cutting
Yes,
you
okay.
off, Jennifer and Grant. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if folks have any additional questions, but I do just want to respect everyone's time. And one request, if you are able to please just complete our feedback poll. I just launched it here. If you could just give us, a couple of answers, it means a lot to the funding that provides these free trainings. And just want to say thank you all so much for joining us this morning and having a really robust conversation. And again, just want to remind everyone that we are available to provide custom training to your authority having jurisdiction. So if your team is interested in having, a training on this, maybe it's the, top 10 things to look for when you have very limited time and trying to sort of prioritize. We're open to suggestions for, how we deliver training virtually. And we also are available again for custom, either virtual or in-person training for your teams. So please do reach out to us if you have any requests like that. And then I do want to make one quick announcement before we wrap up. We do have our first regional energy forum coming on September 8th. It'll be at 9:30 in the morning. And actually, one of our panelists, Dustin Glantz from County of Monterey, will be on that panel. But we're bringing together basically an architect, a plans examiner, a building inspector, and a contractor to have really a frank conversation about how these different roles can work better together through better coordination and better communication. Just trying to, help everyone do a better job with energy code compliance. So be sure to join us on September 8th. I will be promoting that in the email that you'll get later today with the recording of this training and the slides. And then again, if anyone would like a certificate of completion for either AIA or ICC learning units, just feel free to email me and I can get that to you. But yeah, happy to stay on for a couple more minutes if anyone does want to come off mute and join the conversation. But again, just want to say thank you all so much for joining us.
Can I make a recommendation to you guys?
Yeah,
Sure.
love
Yes.
it.
Try to get more involved with the ICC Monterey Bay
Okay.
chapter. I don't see anybody on here that I can see that's on the Monterey Bay chapter. And the Monterey Bay chapter includes all of Monterey County, City of Marina, City of Seaside, City of Monterey, City of Pacific Grove, um,
Yes.
the North County or South area of Santa Cruz County. We're all um, involved in going all the way down to King City area and there
I know
and
that
and
we're
all
trying to.
the independent companies that are involved into.
Yeah, Jim brought you guys up at the Tri-County meeting just yesterday. So and they said they'd be, look into it and I think someone from your department was there because I saw,
Well, it's
Yeah, I, our,
the Bay Ren
well,
has
Bay Ren, but
has
CCR Ren, I saw someone with that in their name
yeah,
respond.
our colleague Giselle,
Yeah.
Giselle Went is on the line, and Giselle has been attending those meetings. We actually were tapped on Monday morning to present at that ICC chapter yesterday because the presenter backed out last minute, and so we actually almost presented yesterday, but they ended up finding someone else. But it's a
Yeah.
great recommendation. We're definitely trying to get more involved with
yeah,
all of our
get
ICC chapters.
hmm And if I can interject, Jim, James, I really appreciated you in the tri-chapter meeting recently bringing up that CCRN should present, and I am starting to have that conversation with our Monterey Bay ICC members. Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing it up and having those conversations. And I can put my email in the chat if you have any recommendations for how we can, better serve the ICC chapter. As I'm the person, regularly attending those meetings, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. As we are always saying in all of these workshops, we want to meet you all where you're at. And yeah, would really just love to know how we can best help you. So yeah, I'll put my email in the chat, and please feel free to send me a line. And this goes to anyone, who attends our classes. We really want to know how we can best help you. So again, really appreciate you bringing that up.
Thanks, Giselle.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I know we are a few minutes over time, so just want to say thank you again to all of you for sticking with us. And feel free to reach out to us with any questions or training requests, and look out for an email from me with the course materials.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again, all.
Bye.